This is a fan-generated show. If you'd like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our new Rumble channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. I am Amy Eden, filling in for Jamie Glazov. Sometimes the Glazov Gang takes a little break from the political battle and focuses on life and humanitarian issues, and this episode does just that. Today our guest is James Richardson, a chronic illness warrior who will share with us his outstanding journey of outsmarting chronic illness and death. James gave a brief talk recently at a cystic fibrosis awareness event in LA. We're going to play that powerful clip for you first and then bring James on the program. Here's the clip.
James, take it away. Thank you.
Woo! Thank you, guys. I appreciate you guys for having me today. My goal today, guys, with everybody here is just to give you some motivation, inspiration, and leave with a little bit of hope in your hearts today. So my name is James Richardson. I'm 29 years old. I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis when I was born. 2 days old, the doctors told me I had 19 years to live. So in essence, I was born with a death sentence. As many of us know, back in the day, cystic fibrosis was a childhood illness. The average life expectancy was between 13 to 15 years old. So bringing my parents bringing myself into this world as a young child, dealing with an expectancy of death at such a young age, it's something that people with cystic fibrosis have to really look deep inside of themselves and figure out why they're here on this world, why they're here in this world. And that was something that I dealt with my entire childhood. Dealing with the fact that I'm not going to live too long and only live maybe till 19 years old, being told I would never play sports, never have children, never be able to build muscle, never have a job, never be in relationships, is something that takes a toll on a child's life. And it allows us to grow older as children. It makes us deal with these thoughts of not being around, the thoughts that we deal with when they're 80, 90 years old at the end of our lives. Now we're dealing with these thoughts when we're children. So I really had to analyze my situation and looking into cystic fibrosis as a child, researching my illness, figuring out what I'm going to do with my life. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to have a job. I wanted to live like a regular human being. Anticipating this life expectancy of 19, my parents, I was lucky I had a great mom by my side who researched cystic fibrosis, put me in every sport that I could, made sure that I was active and tried to fight against CF. My entire life, guys, I've been a fighter, fighting against the illness, against the odds, against proving people wrong that have told me that I couldn't do things in my life. So as I approached this life expectancy date the doctors gave me of 19 years old, I really thought to myself, is this it for me? Is this something that I'm only going to be here on this earth for 19 years? I'm never going to have relationships. Why do I have this illness? Why is this something that I was born with and none of my friends had and none of my people around me understood what it was? I kept this a secret, guys, for my entire life until I was 26 years old. From the years of 19 to 26, by the way, I lived past 19. Right. That was the first success in my life. So I lived past 19 years old, and as I'm getting older and into my 20s, becoming a young adult and a young man, I started becoming sicker and sicker. As I'm researching my illness and looking online and these times in my life where I was by myself in a dark room researching cystic fibrosis, and all the symptoms that I was having were equaling death. As I got past my 21st, 22nd birthday and became a young adult, I realized that I was here for a reason, and that was to advocate for the illness, give back, and show people that if you have cystic fibrosis, you can still build muscle, you can still be successful, you can still have a job, a relationship, good friends. So I'm here to speak to you guys today because from 19 to 26 years old was one of the worst times in my entire life. I was dying. My lung function was at 35%, so I was living my life with less than half of a lung. I was working 80 hours a week at the time, driving myself into the ground, trying to be a normal human being. Now with 35% lung function, working 80 hours a week, I was still working out 6 days a week and boxing 4 days a week. I was running a major company at the time. I couldn't go 30 seconds without coughing. I would wake up every single day with chronic headaches. I would cough so much that I would cough all my ribs out of place. Every 3 days, I would have to go to a chiropractor to put my ribs back into place so that I could breathe and function in my normal life. I prayed to God every day for a miracle to heal my lungs and to make me feel like a normal human being. As my 25th, 26th birthday approached, I had an option. I had two options, actually. My doctors told me I either need to get a lung transplant or we have this new drug called Trikafta. So after debating back and forth whether I wanted to get a lung transplant and who knows how long that would take, I was dying, guys. I was in a position in my life where I couldn't breathe. I was suffocating every night. I'd be scared to go to sleep because I would have cough attacks the entire night. So I wouldn't sleep. I would have cough attacks. Now, cough attack, if anybody doesn't know somebody with cystic fibrosis who has a cough attack, we cough until we have no air. In that millisecond of time, you have to tell your brain to breathe. In that millisecond of time, we also are connecting with death. Because I've connected so many times in my life with death and having to deal with those feelings of dying. And it's something that I can never explain to people when they ask me what that feels like. It's just something that I hope that none of you will ever have to experience in your life. As I became 26, I was back to this decision of, do I get a lung transplant or do I start this new medication that nobody knows anything about really? So as I'm figuring out what to do, which is a huge decision for a 26-year-old to figure out whether to get new lungs put into his body. And at the time, the life expectancy for somebody with new lungs is 5 years. I have to take rejection drugs to be able to not be sicker again also with these new lungs. So I decided to take Trikafta. Now for 26 years, I never knew what it was like to take a deep breath. I coughed chronically. I could never go on dates, go to the movies, talk to people, ever be present in a moment. Because I'm always coughing and I'm always thinking about that next cough. So as I took this first dose of Trikafta, I was so scared. The doctors told me there's all these side effects. My liver could shut down. I could have all these different things happening in my body. I took the first dose of Trikafta, and within 2 hours, all the mucus in my lungs started to purge. Now purging means it's just coming out in globs and globs and globs. Now the way I explained how it feels to have cystic fibrosis, picture somebody pouring a bottle of super glue down your lungs and it never stops. So you're always coughing out mucus and glue. So as I take this first dose of Trikafta, I start purging all the mucus out of my lungs. And within 30 minutes after that, I took my first deep breath. So I always tell people, guys, I started my life at 26. I'm 29 now. So I'm technically only 3 years old. So I'm 29 years old now. Before my first dose of Trikafta, I was at 35% lung function. I went into my CF clinic appointment 3 months later. I was at 116% lung function. I had one of the highest lung functions they said they've ever seen. Now this contributes to the working out, staying fit, and healthy. This is what I preach to the people around me. And in my communities now, I advocate for cystic fibrosis. I create free workout plans and give the people around me equipment to help them build the muscle and see the success that they need to be able to live those healthy lives. I really appreciate you guys having me today because this is something that I've wanted to do for a long time. Speak in front of people, tell my story. I've been doing it online for a long time, advocating with different foundations. And there's something that I want to leave with you guys before I go. When there's dark times in your life and you feel like you're being buried, just remember you're being planted. Thank you guys.
Just so moving and so profound. But before I introduce James, I'd like to inform the audience that I'm James's girlfriend. Jamie felt that me interviewing James would bring our message more powerfully across to our audience and that we could also help many couples experiencing their own challenges together. And so here we are. James, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. That was a remarkable talk you gave recently, which I attended along with our friend Jamie. So let's begin by you telling us about the event and why you were invited.
I was invited to the event because I was born with cystic fibrosis, which is a chronic disease. I was born with it when I was diagnosed with it when I was 2 days old. I was given 19 years to live. Right now, I advocate for chronic illness. I advocate for cystic fibrosis. I teach positive mindset, and I got invited to speak and be able to tell my story at that event for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation.
Yeah, and it was an absolutely spectacular event, and you did so great and so amazing. It was really great to be able to be present, to get to watch you tell your story to everyone. But I know that there was so much more to that story that you didn't get to share due to time constraints. So if you could elaborate to give people the full picture of what you have had to face being a CFer.
Yeah, so I'll just give you a little bit of a summary of what cystic fibrosis is. Cystic fibrosis is a chronic condition that floods all the major organs with thick, sticky mucus. It affects our bone density. It affects our lungs. For me, it really destroyed my lungs my entire life. So like I said earlier, I was diagnosed at birth. When I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, this was a childhood illness. And I was given 19 years to live. The biggest thing I missed out on in that speech that we just saw was the emotional toll that it takes on someone with cystic fibrosis, just trying to be a normal human being and live in society as a normal person. And I think that that is the biggest thing for me. It's just having to deal with those things when you're by yourself. It's a very lonely illness. You know, it's something that you have to deal with all these things by yourself, and no one really understands what you're going through, and no one can really support you truly because they never really know what it is and they've never really experienced it. I've dealt with death my entire life. I've battled death multiple times. I've known what it's felt like to almost die multiple times in my life, and I fought through that. And I'm here now today to motivate, inspire, and advocate for my community.
That's absolutely remarkable. And I do want to go back to the point of you having to face death multiple times, because that's not something that we come across often. That's not something that most people have to go through, right? But before we do that, I do want to ask, just to kind of give the audience a little bit of an idea, because I do remember when you first told me you had CF, I had no idea what it was, absolutely no idea. And so you began to tell me the physical symptoms, the physiological symptoms that you felt, right? Such as everything having to do with your lungs, your head, ribs, all of those things that maybe most of us wouldn't know about cystic fibrosis. So could you explain the type of physiological symptoms that you actually have with CF?
Yeah. So I coughed chronically for 26 years, every 30 seconds. So if you can picture yourself coughing when you have a cold for 2 weeks, I did that for 26 years. Multiple lung infections, coughing my ribs out of place, having multiple headaches, battling suffocation in my own body, battling my body trying to kill itself since I was born. So my entire life, I've fought against death. Death has been trying to come after me since I was born. And I'm glad to say that I'm here now, and I've defeated those demons, and I'm living my purpose now.
You've fought back.
Exactly.
You have fought back every single step of the way.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, you have to be a fighter. You don't really have a choice. You know, there was never really a choice for me. It was just something that I was born with. So I had a decision. I could lay down to the illness, let it kill me, or I could figure out a way to push through it and fight against it.
Right. And so when you had these chronic issues with coughing, how did that affect your day-to-day life and being able to just try to be a normal human being and live your daily life?
Yeah, I mean, coughing made me miss out on a lot of my life. Things like getting a haircut, going to the movies, having dinner, having a cup of coffee, waking up and trying to be a normal human being was something that I never really experienced in my life. So the coughing is just something that destroys you, because if you think about just going about your day every single day, trying to work a job, having communication, having friendship, just being a human being, that's something that I could never experience. I was never present in a moment because I was always coughing for my entire life. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't work. I couldn't do anything. So they told me, but I felt like I couldn't do anything. I felt like that in my mind, but I still tried to be a human being. And I think that that's the important thing in all this, is no matter what we're going through and all the pain and the suffering of cystic fibrosis or anything that you're going through, I think that being able to push through that is something that you have to learn, but it's a decision that you also have to make within yourself.
Right. And that's something that you have been able to do so well in your life. You have been able to continuously push through and continuously beat the odds. And I don't know that I know somebody that is able to do that as well as you have been able to. And clearly that's because of your cystic fibrosis. You have had to be a fighter. But that is also something that most of us don't realize that we can also take from you in our own lives as well. Because if you're facing death every single day and being born and being told that you're only going to live until 19 years old and being given a death sentence before you can even do anything in your life, and still be able to go through life positively, continuously having faith in God that He was going to get you through, that's not something that very many people are able to do. And so I'm so amazed, anytime that you tell me your story. I know that you've told me your story several times, but even when you start to break down everything that you have gone through, it's astonishing. It's astonishing what you have been able to do. And so if you could actually tell us a little bit about your childhood as well. I know that we've talked a little bit about that. It was very different for you having cystic fibrosis growing up as a child. So could you tell us how that affected you in your childhood?
Yeah, of course. So my childhood was a lot different than normal kids. So as I said earlier, I was diagnosed when I was born. So when I was diagnosed, doctors told me that I couldn't pretty much do anything. I couldn't build muscle. I couldn't work out. I wouldn't have a job. They told my parents pretty much just like, he's not going to live that long, so don't worry about it. So as I'm being a child and going to school and making friends, and I have to take pills before I eat. I have to do all these treatments every single day. So I always tell people I never really got to have a childhood in a certain sense. There was never like being a child and like just not worrying about anything and going out and doing what I want to do. It was never that, because I'm always worried about my next treatment, or if I'm going to have a coughing spasm, my lungs are going to collapse, or I'm going to have an infection. I can't go to school and be around my friends. So my childhood was very, very different. Yeah, it's a continual way of just pulling yourself out of darkness, I guess you could say. So that was pretty much the definition of my childhood, was just figuring ways out to move around cystic fibrosis and figuring out ways to hide cystic fibrosis when you're a child. Because when you're a child, it's so embarrassing. You don't want to tell people that you're sick. You don't want to be an outcast. Right. You don't want to be a weak kid. So for me, it's like I had to hide it. I kept it hidden for 26 years. It was so embarrassing for me to just tell people that I was sick. And I never wanted to be looked at as that sick child.
Right.
So for me, being able to I just pushed myself to do everything that I said that I couldn't do technically. Well, doctors told me that I couldn't do. I just really just pushed myself. My parents put me in every sport that they possibly could just to make me feel normal. And that was the key to the reason why I am the way I am now, was just, I just never laid down and was like, okay, yeah, I just can't do any of that. I just can't do that. I'm like, no, I can. I'm going to try it and I'm going to do it.
And even as a child, you started that as well. And most children aren't even able to do that. And so piggybacking off of what you mentioned, that you always push yourself to do the things that you were told that you could never do. I remember you explaining to me that you used to play soccer, and you didn't tell your coaches that you were sick, and they would make you run up and down that field, and your lungs couldn't take it. Your lungs couldn't take it, correct? Because you were so sick?
Yeah. So I played sports with multiple lung infections. There wasn't really one time where I played a sport where I wasn't sick. So it's very interesting because I was able to live my life, and being sick was normal. So like people, like when they're sick, they're like, oh, I'm sick for 2 weeks, and then they're better. And then they feel like a human being again. So just imagine never getting better, but you have to operate in daily life. You have to go to work. You have to play sports. And I was so stubborn. I wasn't going to tell anybody that I was sick because I wanted to be normal so bad. So yeah, it was just something that I dealt with, and it became a norm to me. I actually didn't even know what it was like to not be sick. And it was something that it was like, it's almost like looking at somebody and being like, wow, I wonder what that's like. But then you're doing that for your entire life, and everybody you're around is like that. So you're always going, wow, I wonder what that's like. I wonder what it's like to do that. I wonder what it's like to do that. And then realizing that you're never going to be able to do that. So that's tough as a child.
Yeah, I bet. That sounds incredibly hard. And so all of your childhood, all of your teenage years into your adulthood, you kept your deadly illness a secret from those around you. So when and why did you decide to finally be open about it?
Well, I wanted to do something with cystic fibrosis because I realized when I was 26 years old that was my purpose in life. I tried to study cystic fibrosis. I tried to figure out why I have cystic fibrosis. That was always my question. Why do I have CF? Why am I different than everybody else? Why was I born with this and nobody else was? And just 26 years of thinking about why is this? I came to the conclusion of there's got to be a reason why I can do this stuff that a lot of other people with cystic fibrosis can't do. I can do all the things that they've told me I can't do. So I think that was the reason why I started advocating, because that was my purpose in life. I have cystic fibrosis for a reason. So for me to be able to do what I do, there's a lot of people in my community that are so sick, way more sick than I ever have been, multiple surgeries, lung transplants. So for me to be able to give back to them and just kind of give them just teach them, give them a road to walk down, give them a little bit of hope. And that's why I became an advocate for the community and just was open about it. And now it's just who I am.
Are you happy now that you're on the other side and you've been able to be open in public about it?
I mean, yeah, it's insane when you realize what your purpose is, because so many opportunities have come to me because of my purpose. Like today we're on the show because of my purpose of cystic fibrosis, because I have a story to tell. So,
right.
If I would have kept it a secret, who knows, there could be a lot of shut doors that have been opened for me.
Right. And we've talked about this quite a bit as well, how sometimes, we both are believers and we both have faith in God. And we've talked about how some of the struggles that we have had to face in life, when we're going through them, we don't realize why, right? And so for you, that was 26 years that you hit it. And I wonder if maybe, were you ever mad at God for giving you cystic fibrosis?
Oh yeah, all the time. I always used to blame God in a lot of ways, but it's funny how it works, because the reason I became a believer in God and found my faith later on in my life. I mean, I always believed in God, but it became stronger as I got older with my CF, and also when I got sicker, because I had no other option but to lean on God. There was no medication, there was no cure, there was really nothing else. So I had to do that. That was something that was my last option in a way. But once I did that, my whole life changed. Once I became, once I had faith in God and realized that that's my last option, that's when everything changed.
And I think you also realized at the end of the day that God gave you a purpose in life, and maybe there was a blessing hidden within this illness of yours. And I compare you to Joseph from the Bible all the time. We talk about how he had to go through so many trials and so many tribulations. And we also talk about how he was tall and buff and handsome, just like the Bible describes. And I joke around with you all the time and I tell you, you're Joseph, right? But the point is that he also had to go through some incredibly difficult situations in his life. And he continuously kept his faith in God, correct? And you have been able to do the same thing. And in the end, the Lord ended up rewarding him. And I feel that maybe your thought process is, now that you have realized that God gave you this illness, you're going to take it by the reins and lead with him and do what you can with this illness and be able to help and inspire other people, correct?
Yeah, definitely. I think that once I decided to motivate and inspire people, a medication came out to save my life. And I mean, that was just another stamp of approval of God working in my life.
Right. Because we talk about that. Having cystic fibrosis, maybe the audience doesn't know, but typically you are extremely malnourished. You are in and out of hospitals, completely sick, on your deathbed a lot of times, not able to work, not able to have relationships, as you mentioned, right? And so...
Yeah, cystic fibrosis is a weird thing, because if you really think about it, there's no real reason for cystic fibrosis. Like, you're born with this illness and then you just get to suffer your entire life. It doesn't make any sense. So it's like, why the biggest question that I had to understand was just understanding that it's such a dark thing to be born with. Like, we people don't get to pick and choose these cards. They're just dealt with these cards. And my question to God over and over again was, why would you give somebody that hasn't done anything bad this illness and just start them off in a way where you're just suffering your entire life? It's just such an interesting thought to think about. And it's something that I battle with my entire life.
Gosh, that's such a hard battle to deal with, isn't it?
It's very dark and it's very difficult. Yes.
Right. And so after you decided to go public with your cystic fibrosis and you decided to use it as a tool in your life and to be able to move forward and possibly help other people with it, what were people's reactions to you finally letting them know? Because for 26 years you hid this, and for 26 years you dealt with that mental battle, which I want to touch on in a quick minute. But the people around you who were closest to you that didn't know, how did they react?
Just shocked. They didn't really know how to react. Like it's interesting. It's like you be around somebody for 26 years and you never know that they're dying.
Right. They have a deadly illness that they had no idea about, and they had been around you the entire time.
Exactly. So it's a shock, it's a shock. And then the instant, this is what I'm trying to change in the community. The instant response is, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, you're sick. And then they immediately put you in a category of being weak and suffering. Like, the reason why I started advocating for cystic fibrosis is because we have to change that dynamic, not just in CF, but in the world too, as well. Because when somebody, in our world, we look at people and we think, oh, they're born with this, they have cancer, they have cystic fibrosis, they have whatever it may be, any illness or anything that they're suffering with. And we instantly want to feel pity and feel sorry for them. And we want to put them in a box of being like, oh, they're just weak and sick. They're not normal. They're just in this little sick box and they're just this sick individual. So my goal was to change the way people see people with chronic illness and cystic fibrosis specifically, because we're not supposed to have muscle. We're not supposed to be able to lift weights. We're not supposed to be able to work out and train people and have our own business and do whatever we want to do with our life. We're not able to have control of our lives. So I wanted to change, first of all, the appearance of somebody with cystic fibrosis was my first goal. Because once I changed the appearance, then it would change people's mentality of when they see somebody with cystic fibrosis. Because in their minds, it's always been a sick, scrawny, malnourished, like you said earlier, somebody who is just sick. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to change that mentality. I wanted to show people that it's actually the opposite.
And you have done, let me just say, you have done such a beautiful job at doing that. I don't believe that I have ever met anybody in my life who has been dealt with some of the worst cards that you could possibly be handed and still be able to go through life and go through that fire and come out on the other end still positive and loving and full of faith and full of encouragement. And most people are not able to do that. And so I love that you say that you not only want to change the way that people view cystic fibrosis, but you also want to encourage those people that don't have cystic fibrosis. Because I mean, listen, if you can have a death sentence the day that you're born and come on the other end of it, go through that death sentence and still be able to think positively, still be able to live life as fully as you possibly can, still be able to keep that heart and keep a heart of courage, right? I mean, you're unstoppable if you can do that. You're absolutely unstoppable. And so I know that for me, oftentimes as well, even if I'm facing my normal battles in life and I wasn't given a death sentence and I don't have cystic fibrosis, but you have such a beautiful way of being able to empathize with problems that other people are going through, situations, hardships, right? But still be able to just give that encouragement, right? That encouragement that only somebody who has been through the fire that you have gone through can give. And you do it in such a humbling way and in a way that really you captivate people. You captivate people. And so when the times that I have gone through my own life instances and my own mental battles, so to speak, you're able to pull me out of that because you've been through the depths of your own despair. And so you're able to relate to other people's despair because of that.
Exactly. And there's always that play of like, I'm never going to be the person that's going to compare people's traumas or what they're going through. Like everybody has different things that they go through. Just because mine was so severe doesn't mean that this person's doesn't matter or yours doesn't, or anybody. It doesn't matter the severity of it. I think that it's important to take everybody's pain and take everybody's suffering and just try your best to be able to help them through it. I think that if you go through a lot of suffering and you go through a lot of pain in your life, you need to be able to give back to people because that's the reason why you're going through it. You know, that's some people have the ability to take pain more than a lot of people do. And I feel like God also knows that as well. So He obviously, you know, He created us. So He knows exactly how much pain and suffering this person can take over this person. But when two people meet, the reasoning is maybe to help that person through the pain and just put things into perspective a little bit more. We live in a world where being sick is something that is welcomed and almost congratulated in a certain way. Like it's something that people look at when I tell them that I'm sick. Let me just backtrack just a second. In our world, there's people that are sick and they want us to be sick in a lot of ways. Doctors, hospitals, people that are talking to us, trying to tell us what to do with our lives. Now, I encourage a lot of people to actually do the opposite. I've been told so many things about my life before I was even able to live my life. Oh, you can't do this. Oh, you can't do that. Oh, you can't do this. You shouldn't even do that. Well, and I would encourage anybody who's going through that, of somebody telling you, well, you know, you can't do that. And a doctor, oh, you can't do that. Or somebody around you, you shouldn't do that. I would encourage everybody just to do it and try it because you never know. Like these people aren't God. These doctors, whoever you want to talk about, these people around you, your parents, it doesn't matter. Anybody, your siblings, these people aren't God. They don't control that decision. So we need to create a community that does the opposite of that.
Right.
I mean, it's different if your leg is broken and you need some medication for the pain. That's different. We all understand that. But if someone's telling you that you're not going to live for past a certain age, who are they to tell you that? And that's what I would encourage other people to do is if somebody tells you something that's kind of like, whoa, this person just told me I'm going to die at this age, or this person, they told me I hate when they tell people, oh, they only have a couple months to live. Like how do you know that? How do we know that? There's no possible way to know that. People there's not a clock on the wall that tells everybody, okay, well, you got about 3 minutes before you go. Just hold on. There's nothing there. Like we need to go against that. We need to push back against that. We need to go, yeah, you know what? Thanks for the advice, but I'm going to go ahead and do what I want to do.
Right. And you have been able to completely break through any of those barriers or any of those things that doctors or people have tried to limit you and tried to put you in this box. And there's a lot of courage that comes with that. And there's a lot of strength. And same goes with, again, anybody being told, right? You cannot do that. This is the square that you need to be in. These are your limitations, right? Any negative talk that comes from, media, friends, maybe even family members, medical professionals, whatever it may be, we have to keep in mind they're not in charge at the end of the day. At the end of the day, you decide what type of life that you're going to have. And that's exactly what you did. You decided, I'm not laying down. I'm doing what I believe is best in my heart. I'm leading with faith first, and I'm leading with my strength secondly, and look where you are now. I mean, and just your life itself, the way you look, your health, your mentality, the things that you have been able to do, that in itself is a complete testimony to the mental capacity that you have to be able to overcome emotional and the emotional and mental battles that CF has brought to you. And I do actually want to ask you about that, going back to at the very beginning of this conversation. I know that that's something that we've talked about a lot. Most people don't ask you, how's your mental health when you have CF, right? And so I also want you to be able to share that with the audience, because although we're talking about cystic fibrosis today and we're talking about your illness, we have also talked about how the mental battle that you go through is so relatable to what so many people have gone through in their own lives, even without having CF. So if you could just kind of open up a little bit and be a little bit vulnerable and let us know what does go through your mind when you have cystic fibrosis, what is the mental anguish that you have to deal with and try to overcome?
Yeah, I think it all starts in the mind, no matter what we're going through, right? Whether it's depression or anxiety or whatever problems that we have, they all start in the mind. And it trickles down. Obviously, I think that the mind controls the body and that the body controls the mind. So I think that for me, cystic fibrosis created a strong mentality from the day that I was born. Not to say that it was easy. Obviously, for me, I had to create practices in my own life. When I was going down those dark places, there has to be practices that we have to put into our lives, but my practices might be different from other people's. Like, I like to put positivity and just push things, even when I'm not feeling great or I'm dying or I'm suffocating or I'm looking at my illness and everything that my illness is saying is equaling what I'm doing and what's happening to me. And this Google search equals death and all these symptoms I'm having. And you're like, oh my God, I'm going to die. What am I going to do? What are my parents going to think? So all these dark places, I think that for me, I have different practices. I just try to put as much positivity in my mind as I possibly can. And I try to do it so much over and over and over again so that I memorize it. So that when all these things are happening in my life, or I'm sick or I'm in a dark place, I can bring those out. And it's kind of like it's almost like a treasure chest in a way. I can open the treasure chest and I can kind of pick and choose what I want to remind myself of. I want to be thankful for these things. I want to remind myself what I read over here. And because people have been through bad things in their life too. Like, we can learn from these people. So when we learn from these people, we memorize it, we write it down, we read books, we study things. And if we're just going through life and bad things are happening to us and we're just like, oh, I'm just so depressed, I hate my life, and then we just keep doing the same thing over and over again and we never do anything to change it, it's just like working out or getting good at a job. You have to practice. It's repetition over and over and over, but it's a repetition that's never going to stop, because there's always going to be things coming at you, no matter who you are. That's the way life is. So we have to be able to get those practices into play, memorize them, and keep them inside of us and use them almost as a weapon against the hardships. And that's what I do.
It's just absolutely amazing. Every time that you tell me about your story, I mean, I've heard it multiple times, but I never get tired and I never stop getting inspired. And it's actually very interesting because we've talked about this before, because of the fact that you have literally faced death. You've been at the doorstep of death. I've always felt, you went from having a life expectancy of 19 years old and you're 26 years old now, in case we didn't make that clear to the audience. And so 29, I'm sorry, oh my goodness, 29. So you're 29 years old now and you've gone through like this tremendous battle in life to get to be 29 years old. And so sometimes when I have my life situations, they feel so, so irrelevant and not that big of a deal, not too important, because of the fact that you have this deadly illness and you've faced death and you've gone through all these battles. And so we've talked about how I feel I feel almost sometimes like I don't even have the right to complain to you, because how am I going to complain to a person who has been through something 1,000 times worse?
Well, I think that nobody's pain, my answer to that would be nobody's pain is irrelevant, especially with you and mine and your relationship. I think that the foundation of a relationship between two people is to have also trust, but also be able to be a team and support each other no matter how big the problem is or whatever it is. I think that's the key to having a really good relationship. And I never want you to feel that you're irrelevant in any way or anything that you go through, because it's not. It's just us helping each other as a team. There's no gauge in my mind of like, oh, it's up here or it's down here. But how do you feel, baby, with being with me and being with someone with chronic illness? How is that different for you, and how has that changed your life and helped you, or has it made it more difficult for you?
Well, I'll answer that in a minute, but I also just want to clarify. You, like I said, you are such an incredible human being, and you have never once made me feel like my life issues are any less important than what you have had to face in life, which is why I constantly say, anytime I see you, advising someone, imparting words of wisdom, trying to help them out, because that's who you are. You love to help people, and I love that you've been able to take all that darkness that you've gone through to help others. I think you want to be able to make a difference in people's lives. And so I think that because of everything that you have gone through, you're wise beyond your years. And I've told you that so many times. And so I'm so grateful that even though I have felt in the past, or maybe once in a while, that I can't express some negative feelings or thoughts or things that are happening in my life, you have never once made me feel that way. And I love that not only with me, but with others, you can empathize with people's life struggles, and you can relate it to what you have been through. And because you have been through so many difficult things, unfathomable things, you are still able to empathize with other people. You're still able to guide them down a path of enlightenment and love and encouragement and positivity and acceptance. And that's such a beautiful thing about you. But to answer your question, I never thought that I would be with somebody who has CF, but you have been able to bring so much value to my life because of the person that you have become, because of the man that you have become due to your illness. You have been able to move me, shape me, and help me in so many ways that I never thought possible, and that nobody has ever been able to help me with before. And you just have this ability to understand and to think about things differently, right? And you have this completely different mindset than most people. And I love that when I come to you, you're able to help me through these things that I never thought I could be helped through. But the advice you give, the wisdom you partake, there's something different about what you have to offer to people. Not only to me, I'm saying this about myself as well, but just to anybody. And so for me, being in a relationship with somebody who has cystic fibrosis, but you specifically, has been such a blessing in my life. And honestly, I anytime that you are around anybody and they get to see that beauty in you that I see with, your wisdom and your love and your support, it warms my heart, because I love that other people get to see what you have to offer the world due to everything that you have gone through. And we also want to make sure that people know that we're talking about CF here, but truly, you are a remarkable person to be able to help anybody through anything. I don't know why God gave you this gift along with your illness, but I think that you have been able to create something really beautiful and really astounding from your illness.
Yeah, and I agree, and I thank you for all those kind words. And it's interesting how life works, and I think that in life we have to give back to the people that we love, because that's what life is about. I think that it's not about us, it's about everybody else. And I think that the people around you come first, obviously, but being able to help just everybody and give back to them and just show them hope and show them love and show them support, that's what we're missing here. And being in a relationship with you also has showed me what true love is, because also having cystic fibrosis and coming up in the culture that I'm from, there isn't much of that being expressed. So you've helped me be able to express those things to people, which has in return helped me help more people. So you have a lot to do with that too.
Thank you. That was beautiful. But what is even more beautiful, I think, is how we have grown so much as a couple through all of this that we have just talked about. And we really want to let the audience know that despite any physical ailment, any illness, whether you have something or you don't, we want to reach out and be able to extend our help to anybody out there who might be facing their own struggles in life. James and I are disposable and always willing to help and be extend an olive branch to anybody who needs it. And I think that's what God, at the end of the day, put both of us on this earth for and put us together for. And so, James, could you let the audience know where they could reach us if they would like to reach out to us?
Yeah, so you guys can find us on Instagram. Amy's Instagram handle is Amy_Eden, and my Instagram handle is JamesRich23.
All right. And so we also like to give a very special thank you to our friend Jamie for giving us the opportunity to use his platform to spread awareness and be able to reach out and give a message of hope and positivity to all of you watching. As you all know, Jamie is a great host, absolutely incredible at what he does, but he's an even greater friend to James and I. And we'd just like to really give him a special thank you for allowing us this opportunity. And don't worry, because next week he will be back all on his own. But if you would like me to host a show with Jamie right next to me, go ahead and email him. I'm sure he'll put me on. Have a great night, everybody, and God bless.